Alright guys, so here's the review of the Huasuo HS002-1. I probably butchered that name. If you know how to say it properly, let me know down in the comments. So this might actually remind you of another watch from a Japanese brand, but obviously this is a Chinese one from AliExpress, so it's going to be coming in at a far more competitive price. In fact, it's actually going to be a few grand less than that one. But the question you're probably wondering is the quality going to be as good? Or is it just going to be something that looks similar but doesn't have the important things that make that watch what it was? Well, the first big plus is the fact that all the dials on these are all unique. They're all handmade, so no two are the same. And it's actually a pretty labour-intensive process making these dials as well. So it takes about a month to make a dial. That's how much effort and work goes into these. So you've got multiple layers of this technique going on with each dial. And in between each stage, you have to allow it to dry properly before you can move on to the next one. So as you can imagine, if you're doing that multiple times for each dial, it's going to take quite a while. It's quite labour intensive, which is why these are only produced in small numbers and why they take so long to produce as well. And if you're interested in unique dial watches, I've got some others down here, so if you want to check them out, I'll leave a link to them up in the top. But getting back to this one. So this is the little watch roll it comes in. It's a pretty nice one. It's actually similar to this one I've got down here, in that it's got these little poppers. And they're obviously on the inside as well. So it is really nice. Do like this a lot. So I'll quickly take this out and then give you a quick look at it in case you haven't seen the other one. So it's a nice kind of felt interior. Nice and soft. And the cushion on it is pretty nice too. So it's firm and sturdy on the sides. So it clips in nicely, but they're nice and soft in the middle. And here's the actual watch. So they've actually got a few different dial variations with this one. The one I've got here is green. But they also do a green with like gold kind of speckled bits or like spots. Then they do a red one. They do like a browny kind of coloured one with a different kind of texture. And they also do a dragon one. So some really interesting stuff there and different options. And if you want to check them all out, link will be down in the description as always. For me it was between this green one and the kind of browny coloured one, which I think looked really interesting too. But before we get into any more detail on this, first of all let's go over the dimensions. So we've got a diameter of 38mm, thickness of 10.1mm, lug width of 20mm, and the all-important lug to lug is coming in at 46.7mm. Then when it comes to the weight on this supplied leather strap, that's coming in at 66 grams. So pretty nice overall dimensions I think. But now let's talk about this strap in a bit more detail, go over this. Starting with the buckle. So we'll get a zoom in so you can see it a bit better. There we go. So we've got the brand in there on the top, and it's a nicely finished buckle. So brushed mainly with polished chamfer details. Then when it comes to the strap, it's a really nice, soft, supple one. No breaking period at all. Nicely stitched. And then when it comes to the keepers, we've got one fixed, one floating. If we flick it over to the back, you can see we've also got quick release on this, which is a nice touch. But what's catching your eye more is probably this case back. So it's really nice this. I actually think the back of this watch looks just as good as the front, if not better maybe. It's a really nice custom rotor on there, which has got the branding on, and apparently this is inspired by Chinese flying mural, but I get the feeling something might have been lost in translation there. Whatever that means, that's what it says on the listing, but either way it looks good. So you can actually get a choice of movements with this one. It's the PT5000, which is what I've got in this one, or you can get it with the SW200, and it's not actually that much more expensive. When I've seen other brands offer this as an option before, it tends to be a pretty big jump in price, but this one, as I say, isn't as much as you'd expect. When it comes to the rest of the case back, it's got screws not screwed down, and then we've got the usual kind of specs around the outside. It's got the brand name, the fact that it's stainless steel, it's 50-metre water resistance as well. Moving on to the head of the watch, you can see we've got polished sides there, so it does gather fingerprints a bit, so we'll give that a quick wipe first. But then once we do that, you can see it is really nicely finished. Simply done, but it does look good. You can see we've got an actual little bit of detailing on those lugs, kind of integrate into the case, so it's not completely flat all the way across. If we get a zoom in a little bit closer, you'll probably be able to see in a bit more detail, and you'll also be able to see that crown as well. So there you can probably see now where that little bit where it kind of joins almost on those lugs, and then that nice unsigned crown, but it is like a pumpkin style one, or onion depending on what you call it. They're calling it a pumpkin, so I'm saying the pumpkin. Then we've got some polished chamfer details on the edge, and then the top of the lugs are actually brushed. so just breaking that up slightly. But now let's move on to the star of the show with this watch, and that is the dial. So I'm not sure how well this is going to come up on camera. With that, it is actually a lacquered dial. And as I said in the intro, it is a really labour intensive process to make these dials, and no two are the same. So with this particular one I've got, I think it's quite a subtle effect. It's not really in your face. Where you saw that one on that little video I showed you on the intro, that looked like it was popping a bit more. So if you do want to pick one of these up, and you want a specific kind of style, if you want this more subtle one, or if you want something a bit more, as I say, popping a bit more in your face like the other one, maybe message them and just get them to send you some pictures so you can see exactly what you're going to get before they send it. So now we're zoomed in, we can see we've got a fairly basic dial, fully printed, nothing applied, which is kind of what you want. You don't want to be distracting away from that dial. So when it comes to the text on the dial, we've got the branding up at the top, then just above the 6, we've got that Chinese symbol that you can probably just about see. And on this green dial version, that actually translates to forest apparently. The different dial colours have different ones, the red one being fire. You might also be able to see as well, we've got some text down at the bottom which says Swiss movement. So as I said, you can get the SW200 or the PT5000, but I think, as far as I can tell, based on what I've got anyway, that's going to be on the dial no matter what, because I've got the PT5000 version and it's still on there, which is a little bit strange. Ideally, I wouldn't want that there. I think it would have been nicer if they just put Chinese movement or China movement, because they're definitely not shying away from the fact that they're a Chinese brand, because one of the other dial versions, they actually have Chinese symbols on the dial. So like I say, it is a little bit odd, but when it comes to the rest of the watch, we've got fairly simple hands, just high polish, fairly flat. Would have been nice if they'd had a little bit of fast into them, a little bit thicker maybe. But you can see there, that texture on the dial, that lacquer, when you catch it in a certain light, definitely pretty unique, not something I've seen before. Another thing that I've actually noticed with this one I've got compared to the pictures on the listing is the fact that the crystal I've got has just got a slight curve to it, as opposed to being what looks like on the pictures, top hat style crystal, because I'm not getting any of that top hat style kind of distortion around the edge, which you can definitely see in the pictures. I personally would have preferred that, but some might prefer this kind of flat one. You'll probably again have to check what crystal you're going to get on the watch if you do order one, because I'm not entirely sure if they do different crystals. I wasn't told that when I was sent the watch, but perhaps that's a thing, or perhaps they're older pictures. If I can find out, I'll try and clarify and pin a comment or something. So, seeing as we're talking about the crystal, despite it being different to the one advertised, let's check if it's sapphire or not. Using the trusty Diamond Select 2. And yep, we've got sapphire crystal, so that's good to see. Flick it over and check out the back. And yep, that is also sapphire. So despite the crystal being different to what was advertised in the listing, it is sapphire at least both front and back, which is good. So you're probably thinking now, we're not going to be doing a lume shot because this is a dress watch. It's not going to have any lume, especially because there's none on those hands. But you'd be wrong. We do actually have a bit of lume on this. So let's charge it up and see what we're working with. And there we go. So not all that useful, because as you can see, we've got no lume on the hands at all. It's just those numbers, so I don't really know why they've done that. If they're going to go to the trouble of luming the numbers, they should have figured out a way of doing some kind of lume on the hands. So I'm not going to bother checking the longevity on this, because obviously it's not that useful. If you can't have it on the hands, you're not really going to be able to use it at all, unless you're in this kind of condition where it's not fully dark, and you get a little bit of reflection off those hands maybe. It might be somewhat useful. But as I say, it's just a bit of an odd choice. I don't know why they've done it like that. So now, let's show you the movement in action. And as I said earlier, PT5000 or SW200. This is the PT5000 one. So push pull ground. So we have actually got a go state position, so we have to pull it out to the second position. Then the second arm will stop. So we've got hacking. And then we can just change the time. All works well, no problems there. Pop it back in. Then you've got hand winding. It can be a little bit loud on the PT5000s, but it works well enough, no problems. I've never had any issues with any of them. Just don't overwind them though. When I'm doing mine, I tend to do about 15 turns maybe. So, what you're probably wondering now is, what is the price of this? How does it compare to that Japanese watch that we mentioned earlier on? And if you haven't figured out what it is by now, it's the Chrono, specifically the Grand Mori. So, when I had a quick look on Google, I came across, well, the few I could find, because they don't seem to sell it on their site anymore. They were going for about £3,000, which is about $3,700, which is a heck of a lot. especially when you compare it to this. So the prices of this with the PT5000, it's £326, $391, €379. Obviously if you go for the SW200 version, the prices will go up, but not as much as you'd expect. So you might actually find some value in upgrading to that SW200, especially with it having that Swiss movement text on the bottom. Before you make up your mind whether you do want to pick one up or not though, I'll show you what it's like on wrist, and then we'll go over the pros and cons, and then wrap this up. So here it is on my 7-inch wrist, and I think it looks really good. And as I say, nice soft supple strap, so wears really nicely as well. And I think overall, it's definitely a good looking piece. Wears really nicely on wrist as well, nice slim profile with that case, and the curvature to the lugs. Just conforms to wrist really well. I really like the way the light catches that polished bezel and those polished hands as well. It's great that they give you the option of 2 different movements, the fact that we've got the sapphire sandwich front and back. We've also got that really cool custom rotor. Then we've got the quick release on the strap, so if you do want to swap it out, you can do that dead quickly as well. And then obviously that really interesting dial, which is pretty subtle most of the time, as I say, with this particular one I have, but that might change depending on which version you get and which dial you get, because obviously they're all completely individual. I'm not going to lie though, I think I'd actually prefer this even more if it had that top hat style crystal, as in the pictures on the listing. Just adds a little bit extra, I think. But let me know down in the comments, which do you prefer? So I guess we've kind of touched on it now, so let's get into the issues. That is one minor one for me, I guess. The only other real one I have is that Lume. I don't know why they bothered Lume those numbers if they're not going to put Lume on the hands. Either have Lume on both or neither. You don't need just on the numbers because it's pretty much useless. If you have it just on the hands, yeah, that's fine. You can still use it. But the way it is at the moment, they might as well have not bothered. Just get rid of it, save the money, knock the money off the final price. So for me personally, they're pretty minor gripes. I think overall it's a really good watch, especially considering the price when you compare it to the Chrono. So if you really liked that watch, you're probably going to like this one, and you're definitely going to like the saving. So if you do still want to pick one up, link is down in the description as always. That is an affiliate link, it does help support the channel, but you don't pay any extra. So hopefully you've enjoyed watching this, seeing something a bit different. Obviously it's not an original watch by any means, it's definitely heavily inspired by that Chrono, but I imagine that'll be out of the price range of a lot of people. That's it for this one guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.